All right, guys, welcome to day 2, which is multiplying and dividing complex numbers. So with multiplying complex numbers, we are going to, once again, we're going to treat everything normal until we are ready to come up with a final answer. At that point, we will take any of our I exponents and we will simplify them down to I1 with negatives in the middle, and then finish it with combining of like terms. So one of the keys to remember here, since you probably haven't done multiplication for a while, is that when we multiply some algebraic terms together, let's say we're going to take 2x to the third and multiply it by 4x to the second, okay? That we multiply the coefficients together, so that will be 8, and then we add the exponents together. So in this case, we would have x to the 5th power, okay? So that's just a quick review of just basic algebraic multiplication. Just remember to do those things. And then when we're finally done, we're all wrapped up and ready to go. We just want to make sure that we make sure our complex number, our answer is written as a complex number, which means we'll write it in the terms of a plus bi. And so as we're doing this multiplication, we will use a form of distribution. Sometimes we'll use the FOIL method, sometimes we won't need to because it just doesn't ask us to do that. So for instance, in this first problem, number 14, and by the way, if you didn't catch it, we are on page 2 of the Unit 1 resource. We are going to take the negative I and distribute it. So we're going to multiply it by 3, and then we're going to multiply it by I. So let's do that. So negative I times 3 is negative 3I. Negative I times I will be negative I squared. All right, so we got a couple things going on here. One, we have an exponent of I that needs to be simplified. And 2, this is not in the form of a plus bi. So there's a couple of things we need to do before we can have a final version of this problem. So for the moment, we will leave the negative 3i as it is, but we're going to change the I squared to negative 1. So if you remember, on Monday, we talked about the 4 versions of I. That I squared right here turns into negative 1. So to continue to simplify this problem, we have negative 3i, and you get a double negative right here, plus 1. All right, so the last thing we have to do is write it in the form a plus bi. So basically what we have to do is we have to take and we have to switch these. The 3i is coming over there, and the 1 is coming over here. Make sure that the signs stay where they're supposed to be. The 1 is a positive 1. The negative 3i stays negative 3i. And that is the multiplication of number 14. As we move into number 15 needs to be FOILed. So we get to use the first outer inner last, or double distribution. So 2 is going to multiply to negative 6, negative 12. 2 times 2i, or negative 2i, is negative 4i. And then let's use purple. That is, let's move this so we can see what it is. There we go. That is a 3i. So we're going to take this 3i and multiply it by negative 6. So that is negative 18i. and then 3i times negative 2i is negative 6i squared. So that's the multiplication. Haven't done any simplifying, haven't done any combination of like terms. It's simply multiplication. So we have to do whatever simplifying we can. Now, what you saw over here was that I squared turns to negative 1. Negative 1 times a negative, change the sign to a positive 1. So I'm going to shortcut that and say that I squared changes the sign to a positive 1. And so that's what you end up with down here. So I don't want to over jumble too much stuff. But what's going to happen over here on this purple negative 6i, right here. So we're back over here to negative 6i squared. The I squared means negative 1. So basically, let me go back to purple. So we get negative 6 times negative 1, which eventually is going to give me a positive 6. So now that takes up a lot of room. And here in Algebra 2, we got a lot to cover. And we've got a lot to do. But we don't have a lot of space to do all this work in. So hopefully you're watching the video and not just taking, not just printing off your notes. So we're going to do that again. We're going to do that a little bit quicker. I squared means to multiply by negative 1. So I squared changes the sign to positive 6. And so we can do that like a 3-step process in basically one quick step. So now we've changed this negative 6i to a positive 6. And now we can do some combining of like terms. So these two are going to combine. And these two are going to combine. So we get negative 12 plus 6 is negative 6. Negative 4i minus 18i is negative 22i. And that is our final version. Now, it is important to understand everything that's going on. There's a lot that's going on there. But we do have to, at some point, start to conserve space in our problems and have a greater understanding of what's going on. So we'll see if we picked up on that as we move into problem number 16. All right. So again, we'll use FOIL. Negative 3 times 8 is negative 24. Negative 3 times 5i is negative 15i. I times 8 is 8i. And I times 5i is 5i squared. Okay? So anytime we see I squared changes the sign of 5 to negative 5. At that point, the two terms in the middle and the two terms on the outsides can combine. So we can combine those like terms. For a finished product, negative 24 minus 5 is negative 29, and negative 15 plus 8i is negative 7i. Okay, so this would be a point where you would want to ask a question. So if you have one, please let me know. All right, so let's move on. Let's see. Why don't you guys try one of these three? You guys pick whichever one that you want to try. I'm going to pause the video. You pause the video. I'm just going to put the answers up here. And then you guys can check the one that you're working on. All right, so you should have had an opportunity to try one of these three problems on your own. So at this point is a time to ask a question and let me know what you want to ask me about. All right, so now we move on to the division of complex numbers. So in the division of complex numbers, we do a lot of the multiplication that we just talked about. So hopefully you understand the multiplication. Now, in order to do the division properly, we have to use something called a conjugate. So a conjugate are two complex numbers with different, let's fix that, with different signs. So you'll notice that the two binomials have the same numbers, but the imaginary part has different signs. So one of them is positive and one of them is negative. These two things are called conjugates. And what they do is they basically cancel out the imaginary part and they give you a real number. So when you multiply these two together, you end up with 20. So all you do is you get out of that, when you do all that multiplication, the foiling, the canceling, the simplifying, you just get 20. And so that's all that's left. The imaginary part disappears. So in order to get into the actual division, you have to multiply the numerator and the denominator by a conjugate. And the conjugate is going to come from the denominator. So the denominator is this part down here, the bottom of the fraction. So in order for us to do the division, we first have to create the conjugates for each problem. So the conjugate for each problem will be 3 minus 8i, negative 1 plus 2i, and 1 minus I. And so what the difference is you have different signs. Negative, positive, positive, negative. Okay? So we have to be able to create the conjugates for each denominator. Now, with all that done, okay, we'll go back now and we will do the multiplication / division for each problem. All right. Read it up. So we get to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate of the denominator. And so we're going to multiply the top by 3 minus 8i and the bottom by 3 minus 8i. All right, so this is where the understanding of multiplication comes in handy. And so if we can do this kind of quickly, it will definitely help. So 5 times 3 and 5 times negative 8i is 15. 15 minus 40i, and then we have negative 2i times 3 and times negative 8i, negative 6i, and positive 16i squared. And if you remember from the multiplication, I squared changes a sign. So that's the top. Now we get to go to the bottom. 3 times 3 is 9, times negative 8i is negative 24i, positive 8i times 3 is positive 24i, 8 times negative 8 is negative 64i squared. And I squared changes the sign, makes that a positive 64. All right, all that. Now we simplify, combine like terms, and probably are done. So just to highlight some of this, 15 and 16. It's actually negative 16. So 15 take away 16 is negative 1. Negative 40, negative 6 gives us negative Come on, wrong pen. Negative 46i. Please note that that is in complex terms, so it's a plus bi. The denominator comes from the blue stuff. 9 plus 64. 9 plus 64 is 73. 3. And then negative 24 and positive 24 cancel each other out, giving us the real number on the bottom, which gives us the final answer, because nothing there can be simplified, of negative 1 minus 46i all over 73. So I'm going to go ahead and show you number 21. We've probably stopped and taken a break. If you need to say something, ask a question, please do. Okay, so our conjugate for number 21 comes from the denominator. It will be negative 1 plus 2i, and same thing on the bottom. Exactly the same thing on the top and bottom. So we multiply. 3 times both of those. Negative 3 plus 6i. And then 11i times both of those is negative 11i. And 22i squared. I squared changes the sign to negative 22. So at your top, bottom, negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. Negative 1 times 2i is negative 2i. Negative 2i times negative 1 is 2i. And 2i times 2i is plus 4i squared, which changes the sign to negative 4. So let's combine some numbers on the top. Negative 3, negative 22 is negative 25. Negative, 6i, negative 11i is negative 5i. In complex proper form, a plus bi. On your bottom, these two in the middle will always cancel each other out. That's what conjugates do. So you have 1 minus 4 is, hang on, that pen right. You know what? I've got a sign wrong right there, and I'm sure you guys caught it. Scoot this over a little bit. That's a negative 2. So just FYI, eraser, right in here, the sign on the original 4 is supposed to be a negative, and then the I squared, change it to a positive, which then we get a 5 on the bottom. So what you might notice now is that 5 divides into both of these numbers, so we need to do that. And we'll finish this up. Oops, I don't do that. Negative 5 divided by 5 is negative 5. And negative 5i divided by 5 is negative 1i. So there's the final division for that problem. All right, so I want you to take a minute. I want you to try this problem on your own. Feel free to pause the video because I'm just about to put the answer up here and I don't want you to quite see it yet. So pause. Okay, So there is your answer for problem number 23. Please ask me questions about that if you did not get it correct. And since you just finished asking me questions, your assignment will be on page 5 of the Unit 1 resource, numbers 1 through 14 all, and we will be working on assigning you a quiz through CTLS Assess that will be due on this Thursday. Thanks, guys, for a good day. Please ask questions when you need to, and we will see you soon.